Hello everybody. As you know, last month we have started a new initiative of sharing CV market insights. So this month also we'll be sharing the CV insights for August 2020. The agenda for today is basically to share M&HCV sales volumes, economical pointers, CV market insights in detail, followed by road ahead. This time also our expert is Mr. Shyam Maller, former Executive Vice President of Volvo Eicher. I want to thank him for taking out his time and sharing his valuable insights. As you know, we are providing various services right from market research, design, testing, and other services required for a new product introduction. So please contact us for any such requirements. Thank you very much, and let us hear from Mr. Shyam.
Thank you, Rajesh, for having me over. This will be our August analysis in the new format. And I do believe that the new format is quite crisp and it gives a lot of time for the audience to go through the text which is there in the form of the PDF. So I will only touch upon the highlights of the various slides and the information that are there in the section which is called the CV industry analysis for the month of August. The CV industry, unlike the car, the tractor and the two-wheeler industry, is still under stress. The main issue or the root cause is basically low demand. Most of the manufacturers have sorted out their supply side issues. So now they need to fix the demand so that they can improve their capacity utilization. The capacity utilization at most of the OEMs, and I'm hazarding a guess, would probably be not more than maybe about 60 to 65%, and especially those OEMs who are predominantly into only M&HCVs and LCVs. If you really sift between the lines, you would see in the first table, the table on the top, that the overall CV industry has contracted only by 13.3%. But then there are players like Tata Motors and Mahindra who have done much better. And that's for the simple reason that they have a fairly large share of the SCVs in their portfolio, and that is why their YOY change is seen to be less than the other manufacturers. And we are seeing there is buying which is happening particularly in the SCVs and LCVs, particularly in the 4-tire category as well as the 4x2 segment. And the SCVs are particularly preferred in the rural oblique agri segment, particularly in the semi-urban and the rural areas. Having said that, it is important to know that the truck utilization at the various operators is still quite low. The only silver lining, we will see that in the next section, is the sales in the M&HCV tipper segment. Now, if you look at the table at the bottom on the page 1, we are having the analysis of the M&HCV segment. Now, the M&HCV segment, as you would see, the August volumes are definitely higher for the industry as compared to the July sales. At it was 6636 in the month of August as compared to 4634. However, we still are behind last year. So YOY, the degrowth is about 43.4. Having said that, I think the next slide, which is basically the slide which talks about the YTD degrowth, and I think that is showing a reasonably good picture. Over the last 3 months, which we have been tracking since the month of June, we are seeing that the YTD degrowth is coming down. It has come down actually from 93% in June to 88% in July, and the YTD August of FY21 as compared to FY20 is now only at a degrowth of about 67%. What this implies is that month on month, I think there is progress being done in the industry, particularly the LCV, SCV industry. The bus business is still not yet out of the woods. The shared mobility concern continues to be suppressing the demand. So that's so much for the first section of the presentation. Thank you. In this section, let's take a look at some of the macroeconomic pointers that have an influence on the automobile industry, both in a direct as well as an indirect manner. Very recently, a couple of days back, I think we had the GDP figures that were published. It's really come down as a very, very rude shock, though in the sense that all of us knew that for the period April to June, which is the first quarter for the Indian fiscal, with lockdown being predominantly impacting the entire business, the economy degrew by about close to 24%. And the primary sectors that contributed to it obviously were manufacturing, which accounted for almost 40%. Construction also went down, so did mining and quarrying, and so was the services like trade, hotel and transport. Against that backdrop, we also seen that the government has been forced to spend, and their trade deficit has, the fiscal deficit has gone up significantly. They've already crossed the full year budgeted numbers. What this means is that the government's ability to spend going forward in the current fiscal is going to be under significant pressure. One of the key sectors that impacts, and particularly the M&HCV demand, is the core sector. Now, the core sector consists of industries like coal, steel, cement, natural gas. So we have seen that for the fifth month running that this core sector also has degrown. The silver lining, of course, is the fact that the month-on-month degrowth has been lower, which would mean that we should be improving over a period of the next few months. The only one sector that has held up even in the first quarter is basically the farm sector, and that has grown by about 3.4%. And we have already seen the kind of sales that have happened of tractors. We are quite bullish going forward on the agri sector as well, for the reason that the Kharif season is going to be extremely good, and the production is expected to be much higher than what we had last year. Another direct indicator that is of key importance to us is the toll collections. Now, the toll collections by NHAI have reached a level of almost 85% of the pre-COVID levels. And now with Unlock 4.0, with restrictions removed on inter-district and interstate travel, I would think that the toll collections would come back to normalcy. The next point would, of course, be the e-way bill generation. We almost reached the same levels as last year, so that is another good area for us to look at, or a positive development. NHAI has also released figures in terms of the highway construction that they have been doing. The entire last year, they were having a run rate of about 28 kilometers a day. Not very surprising that it has dropped to about 22 kilometers a day in the first quarter. However, we do believe that with now the economy opening up, we think that the road construction would go up, and that would improve the potential for sales of the commercial vehicles. Last but not the least, this came, of course, as a surprise. The diesel demand in the month of August has dropped by almost 12%. It's the second straight month of drop. But like the other indicators, I would imagine that some of these areas would get corrected as we go along in the months of September and October. So much so for the section on macroeconomic pointers. The details are available in the PDF. Thank you. So some of the key observations are that the LCV and the SCV demand has been very good in the month of August. And this is being driven particularly by segments which are in the semi-urban and the rural areas, which are meant for farm products and the perishables. Of course, the e-commerce demand continues to be vibrant. The 4x2 segment, which is the 16,200 kg GVW to the currently rated 18.5 ton GVW trucks, are also doing good, and for the same reason that the e-commerce segment drives this particular demand. The third segment that is doing good is basically the 6x4 and the 8x4 tippers, and this is basically for segments like soft mining, and these are typically utilized when the vehicles need to be replaced. Because of the duty cycle being very intense, these trucks have got lower life, and that is why you see a demand for tippers. The bus business, as I mentioned earlier, continues to be under stress, and I do think that because of shared mobility concerns, it is going to come back in a good way at all, at least in this fiscal. That is my assessment. Now, typically, what one sees when there are changes in the economy, in the up cycles and the down cycles, it is the M&HCV industry that shows the lead. And with a lag effect of about 3 to 4 months, it is the LCV ICV segment that follows. However, it appears that we are finding that in the current year, it is the SCVs that have taken the lead and are continuing to drive the demand. Now, in the case of BS6, the only requirements, to the best of our knowledge, is will be picked up by those segments which are insisting on, or the clients who are insisting on new trucks, and this could be in the categories of the LPG gas cylinder transportation or the CNG gas cascade transportation or e-commerce. The other segments, I do believe that there are enough trucks available in the marketplace that should be sufficient to take care of the demand, which is still quite subdued. Another big angle which should help OEMs to generate demand is the support that they need to get from financiers. Now, we all know that the moratorium 2 has ended on 31st of August, and right now the financiers are putting together their numbers in terms of how their portfolio is going to be looking like. I would think that the month of September is going to be quite difficult, as many of these financiers would try to clamp down, and therefore I think it is going to be critical to have them on your side if we have to have a vibrant September. Thank you. Now we are at the last section, which is basically the outlook for the CV industry going forward, which is the next few months. I think if one has to move the commercial vehicle industry out of the current dire situation, I think the government needs to act on a few key areas. First is the long-awaited scrappage policy. It needs to be very simple, and the incentive needs to be paid out in a very swift manner. That's the first point. The second one, of course, is the government is looking at GST reduction in the case of two-wheelers. I do not know as to why is it that they still believe that the CV industry is not going to be in the same bracket of not being treated as a sin good. The third area is, which is what the government has been speaking about for quite a while, is the investment or the spend that they need to do on infrastructure. I think this is where we need to see the action on the ground. So in terms of building roads, bridges, canals, ports, etc., which can give a fillip to the construction segment of the M&HCV sector. Having said that, let's look at what are the positives or the upsides which we have, which we need to leverage on. The first one is the fact that with now the Unlock 4.0, we would certainly have more opportunities to address the newer segments. And with now the interstate restrictions on transportation being now lifted, and with more and more businesses being opened, it should give us scope to widen the potential to sell vehicles in many more segments. I've already mentioned about the second segment, which is basically the agri-linked based on the bumper kharif crop that we're going to have. I think that needs to be fully harnessed. And I do think that it would make good sense for the dealers to look at going beyond of their areas, which are typically in cities, into the towns and the semi-urban areas, which is where I would think the real demand would exist. That's the second point. The third thing is that the dealers would now need to sharpen their phygital, which is basically the physical cum digital selling skills, to ensure that they are able to leverage these opportunities that would come in front of us. Let's look at some of the showstoppers or some of the things that would probably come in the way. These would be predominantly from a financing perspective. I did mention about post-moratorium, how would the financiers' behavior change in terms of looking at various profiles. As it is, as I understand, in these couple of months, the financiers have been only looking at ticket values of 15 lakhs and less, and there too, the LTVs, which is basically the loan to values, have been coming down from the erstwhile, which is the pre-COVID levels of about almost 90 to 95% plus, to now levels of about 80 to 85%. What this means is that on a higher cost of a BS6 vehicle, the margin money that the customer needs to bring to the table is much higher. And there seems to be this reluctance, or that the customers are not coming forward in terms of having this higher margin money being brought to the table to get funding done. So it's kind of a impasse that is there between the customers and the financiers, and that's one of the reasons why some of the segments, which are typically the ICVs and MNHCVs, are struggling. The only other area which I apprehend is the fact that once the volumes start moving up, I would think that the discounts would probably go up, and which is obviously not a very good thing either for the OEM or for the matter for the financiers. So I think this is something which needs to be dealt with a lot of caution. The other area which I believe we will see growth is the used truck business, and this is basically coming from a background that post-moratorium there could be a fairly large share of customers who would not be able to repay their loans, and where vehicles could get repossessed, because some of these customers may not be allowed the restructuring that the various financiers are working upon. So this would obviously move a lot of trucks into the so-called used truck domain, and particularly in the ICV, LCV category, there would be a preference for BS4 trucks, for the reason that these customers would be very, very happy not to have AdBlue, which is now compulsory in all trucks, including LCVs and ICVs. So I would think that there could be a demand for used trucks, particularly of the BS4, coming into the market, and this obviously will have a softening effect on the new truck demand. Of course, new truck demand would continue in those segments which I mentioned about, which is e-commerce, which is the CNG cascade transportation, and the few other segments that I mentioned, the multi-axle tippers. So this could be another area that the OEMs would need to watch out for. Last but not the least, from a fleet operator perspective, I think in these difficult times, there would be consolidation, and the small operators would potentially be edged out of the market, and therefore we would see more and more medium and large scale operators coming into the business, and these would need to be treated differently by the OEMs and the financiers going forward. The last part, of course, is to do with the channel partners, which is basically the dealer fraternity, who have been under stress with much lower volumes, which don't make any economic sense, and some of these dealerships are literally in a financial distress. I think it makes sense for a lot of OEMs to kind of keep the flock together and ensure that these channel partners continue to remain in business, and as the business picks up, they should also be able to contribute to the company sales. Thank you so much.